Hi, John.
Hello there.
Hi. It's just making me smile. This.
Well, that's good. That's kind of how we connected in the first place. Just
Exactly. I just can't help it to start laughing immediately when you start talking. Not because you're like
big silly faces, exactly. So
exactly.
We'll have lots of that.
Yeah, so let's do an introduction for the viewers and listeners that do not know you yet. Maybe they do, you never know. You're quite famous locally. John and I met on the beautiful island of Rhodos in Greece when I was trying to find my way in 2019 when I was working as a scuba instructor. This is also a story that I actually restarted telling recently, so it all adds up. We met in a bar where you were performing because you have many talents, but we will get into that soon. And I think we did a couple of jams together as well. So that was
I seem to recall you did a good Dutch Amy Winehouse.
Oh yeah, Dutch Amy Winehouse, yes. So, some exposure here. John, I'm very happy to have you here today because you have a remarkable story. And that's why I decided to record a podcast in English, because your story is really good. First, can you quickly introduce yourself a little bit, and then we go back to how it all started, your journey, and deeper into
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's a massive pleasure. You're very inspirational and you've great energy, and it's wonderful that you're bringing your message and your energy to the people watching, and I'm sure you're going to inspire a lot of people along the way. So thank you for asking me to be on the podcast. So I really appreciate that, and thank you, Dutch people, for humouring this English clown here with because obviously most of you speak better English than a lot of my countrymen. So thank you for that. My mother's Irish, my dad's English. I grew up in England. I travelled a lot when I was younger as a musician, mainly. Singing and playing guitar. I got into dog training and animal behavior in 2005, and that's taken me to various corners of the globe. I've worked in Zambia, I've worked in America, I've worked in Serbia, in animal shelters, and more recently I've become interested in education. So I've written a book, which is, by some good fortune, is now part of the Greek national curriculum. So my passion is to bring the message of responsible animal care and the lessons that teaches us as human beings to kids, to try and help from the bottom up in Greece. And that's kind of in a nutshell what's going on. So animal care, music, and a few other things on the side we'll have to.
Yeah, and you are still in Greece. You're living in Greece.
Yeah, so I live in Rhodes, it's not always easy, but when it's good, it's good, and when it's bad, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's the island life.
Exactly. You know all about it.
Yeah, very busy summers, very boring winters.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, I've never really got the concept of being bored. There's so many books to read. There's so many films to watch. There's so many interesting people to talk to. There's so many things that we can achieve. I understand having downtime, and the Greeks are definitely platinum medal wearers of the relaxing type.
Absolutely.
Which I find very difficult personally. But there's lessons to be learned everywhere.
Absolutely. So I can totally relate to what you are saying. What I would like to do, John, is to go back because we have a few steps actually that happen in your life, and I want to go back to when you were still in England and you were deciding. Well, maybe go even back a little bit before that. Can you describe to us your life, how it was, how you felt, what your doubts were before you start making decisions to change?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've always been lucky because I've always backed myself. So that'll be a recurring theme. And it's something that I saw in you immediately when we met, is that you have that ability to back yourself. And from a very young age, I never really felt at home in the system. I never really enjoyed school that much. I mean, I like the girls and I like playing music and I like playing sport, and that was like it. I mean, the whole thing for me it seemed so facile and overly structured and generic. It didn't feel like it was really catering to the individual. So that I kind of knew from a very early age that I was never going to fit into the kind of cookie cutter part of life, and I needed to find my own way. And I was lucky enough that my parents supported me in that. And I've got 3 sisters and a brother, so they're all completely different characters. And my parents are my mum is very eccentric as well. She's an environmental activist, so she was out there like getting arrested and kicking off. And we were recycling newspapers in like the 80s, and my mum had a store for holistic types of food in the 80s, which was unheard of.
Right now really it's quite hip, but back then it's nobody was into that.
No, exactly. So she had this store, but because everyone came in and they couldn't afford anything because it was expensive, she just gave it all away. So she shut down within a year. She just basically gave it all away.
She was ahead of her time.
In some ways, yeah.
In some ways, not. All right.
Yeah, you know, it's important to have balance in relationships, as you know. So my mum and dad are, as we say in England, chalk and cheese, like completely different creatures. And my dad's a pragmatist, very, very English, and my mum's a nutcase and very, very Irish. So he allowed her with his pragmatism to fly. He helped her to fly with his pragmatism. So I was always kind of brought up to follow my ideas and follow my thoughts, and I got into music. And as soon as I finished school, like the day I finished school, I made plans to travel immediately. And I traveled and I was just playing music. So I was busking and just doing that kind of vagabonding kind of life, and it was great fun.
Like in The Witcher.
Yeah.
The guy with the bard.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's part of my kind of, again, my Irish culture, and music is transcendental. So music's like exists above, where we are in some ways. And I always tell my son, music was around before we came, and it'll be there after us, because it's in the trees, it's in the plants and the animals, and music's just everywhere, the sea. So that was my calling for a while. But unfortunately, when I was in my 20s, I was a very badly behaved young man. So and that coupled with music doesn't always add up well. So I had some issues there when I was in my 20s. But that really, coming through those things, really helped me to put myself in a position where I could to grow, basically.
Yeah. So what were your insights back then? Like, you were a bit wild, maybe, to say it like that.
I was, but but also quite selfish. And I think when you're talking about the issues you talk about on your podcast, the idea of selfishness or just being true to yourself, and where's the line, and
where are you going too far?
Exactly, yeah. So following your heart, and sometimes to the detriment of other people, but sometimes that needs to be done. And these are complicated issues we can talk about for forever. So it's about finding your own way and realizing that. See, in English, there's a dirty word that begins with a C, but for me, that's compromise. Like, because I was very uncompromising when I was younger, and sometimes that can get you into trouble. Yeah.
And when did you feel that you started changing?
When I left, I was unceremoniously kicked out of my band when I was 23 years old, and at that exact time, my grandfather died.
Okay.
And there's quite a cute story that when my mum and my dad met in 1964, he asked her to marry him, and my mum had a younger brother who had Down syndrome, and my mum said, "I'll only marry you if, when my parents die, we look after my uncle. That's my brother, so that'll be my uncle." And sure enough, when my grandfather died, my mum was like, "Right, remember that promise like a million years ago?" And my dad was like, "Shit."
Yeah.
So he came and lived with my mum and dad, but at the same time, I'd left London, so I'd finished university where I studied drama. I was doing acting.
Yeah.
Another thing that my past. And I just happened to come back home at that point, and even though it was a really difficult time for me, I found some catharsis in looking after my Down syndrome uncle, which is something I really love to do, and I helped sell into his daycare center and had a lot of fun with that. So that was a kind of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. So you start seeing another side of yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yay. Interesting. I didn't know that yet, John. Interesting.
There's a lot you don't know about me, Birgit.
No, we don't. Normally, we don't have so much time to talk because it's always like really busy around this. So we just get like 10 minutes tops.
Yeah, you and I. But the thing is with you and me is we've never really needed that much because we've always just connected quite naturally.
Yeah, so just go with the flow.
It's always been quite effortless with us.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. But it's really nice to hear it in more depth, let's say. So, okay, you start being like an unofficial caretaker, let's say.
Exactly.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, I always called him my nemesis.
Oh.
He's passed on now, but I mean, I think he was 64 when he passed on. So for Down syndrome, that's a good old age. Yeah. But the thing is, like I always said, people always say, that's a good age. But the thing is, we always made him feel like he was part of this, a lot of people, they get put in a corner when they have, when they're handicapped or whatever. But he was never like that. We were like, right, you're involved. Like every party, he was there. He was at the table. He was a phenomenal musician. He could play 5 or 6 instruments by ear. He was a massive flirt, like all my Irish family.
Good banter with your uncle.
Top banter and charming as hell, just so charming. So yeah, he was great. So I think I made a few wrong turns. I started writing a book, and then I found myself bizarrely falling into working with dogs, and that's where kind of everything changed, because it was something that was natural to me, because I'd lived with dogs and I'd worked with horses bizarrely when I was younger. And I never found the interaction with animals difficult. I always loved it, and I found it very intuitive. And as soon as I started working with dogs, I realized that it wasn't the dogs that I was interested in. It was the connection between the people and the dogs. It was that was the thing that I really zoned in on. And that's what I've followed ever since. And that's why I've created the academy I've created to concentrate on the relationship we have with our animals and what that teaches us about ourselves. That's really my thing now. Yeah,
I know. We'll get into that a bit more. There was, if I'm not mistaken, there was a special dog that actually put you on this path. Isn't that right? Can you tell us a little bit about the dog?
Yeah, she's still with us actually. She's like the Terminator. Crossed with Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't know. She is a Rottweiler crossed with a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. She's a Marmalade. We call her she's got about 1 million nicknames, but she's a Lady Marmalade. She's a matriarch. She's a tank. And when I started working with dogs, what our dogs do, very much like our children, is they shine a light. They hold a mirror up to us, and they show us our inadequacies, mainly the things that we're not good at. So. When you get angry with yourself because you're not doing the right thing as a parent or with a dog, it's generally because you're getting something wrong. So so a lot of my job is about having the self-awareness to realize that in myself, and also to teach other people to realize it, being present and being self-aware. So she came into my life. She's excuse my French, but she was a little bit of a slut. Yeah, so she always wanted some action. So she got herself pregnant in my communal garden. And the story is actually quite interesting, because I went to Zambia, so I was like the first animal behaviorist person that went to Zambia and worked in the animal welfare there. And I was staying with my friend who has an elephant orphanage in National Park, which is completely bonkers. And when I was away, my friend looked after this dog, and he took her up to the Highlands of Scotland, which is about 600 miles from London, for Christmas when I was in Zambia. And his mum fell in love with my dog and was like, oh my God, I hope this guy doesn't come back. I love this dog. I want to keep it forever. when I came back, the dog got pregnant. And I was like, oh my God, I've got a full-time job. What am I going to do? How am I going to sort out the situation with the dog? And then I thought, I had this bright idea. I was like, oh my God, my mate's mum loves my dog. So I was like, picked up the phone. I was like, hello, you remember my dog Winnie? And she was like, and I said, well, she's pregnant. If I pay you, can I drive Winnie up to you, and then you can have the puppies, and you can pick the puppy that you want, and then they can stay with you until they're ready to be rehomed. And she was like, yeah, all right. So next day in the car, 12-hour drive, dog in the car, drop off the pregnant dog. She gives birth to 8 dogs. They all now live in farms in Scotland. And yeah, so that's the Winnie story. She's just an incredible character. And yeah, she's been a great teacher. I'm not sure she'll be around that much longer. And so I enjoy every little tiny moment I have with her.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, so that started changing in your life. But then you were still traveling Zambia, you were still in the UK. When did you decide and why to move to Rhodes?
Yeah, so I think I was getting a little bit too comfortable. And I think for me personally, my character, and also I think for a lot of the people that listen to you and watch you and, connect with you, and the kind of people that zone into this kind of podcast, is that getting comfortable is not the way forward. It's the discomfort. It's the idea that there's more to life. There's more to you. There's space to grow.
Yeah.
So
how you saying you felt too comfortable?
Yeah.
But how did you recognize that you were too comfortable? What kind of behavior did you?
So I had a dog care service in London, and I was often looking after up to about 20 dogs a day. So I was making really good money. I was living in a very, very nice part of London.
Okay.
Really nice flat.
Which area?
Nice car. Sorry?
Which area did you live?
I was living in Wimbledon.
Oh, Wimbledon, yeah.
So
Cool.
Wimbledon, so
I've been
tennis
before,
country.
so it was
yeah,
on
tennis
the
country.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So my clients were in Putney and Barnes and Southfields. And,
yeah, it's a good area.
Wandsworth. Lovely area. Yeah, exactly. Lots of green spaces. Lots of people with dogs. Lots of people without a clue about dogs with dogs, which is kind of a dream situation. Because you have all these ignorant, often people they've left home and they're like, oh, I've left home and I should get a dog now. And they've never had their own dog. And then they're a bit like, they call me and they're like, what do I do with this dog? Yes. So, so yeah, it was great. I had a niche there, because even though there were other people that did similar things to me, my focus has always been on the human-animal connection. So a lot, and this is a controversial subject, but a lot of people that work in animal welfare are kind of anti-human. They're kind of like, animals are much better than humans and blah, blah, blah. And I find that a little bit oversimplistic and a bit lazy. And I understand that people who are jaded and have had bad relationships with humans, maybe through awful circumstances, parents or exes or whatever, they turn to animals and then they find they get unconditional love, and which is great. But often they miss the point that human beings are also pretty spectacular as a species. So because I'd focused so much on the human side of the connection, I found that I was getting a lot of success, because people would be interested in what their dogs were doing and how they were behaving, and I would be able to give them lots of feedback completely pertaining to how they were treating their animal and give them advice. And that's how I got my niche. The problem is, though, is I was making a lot of money, and I also had a lot of spare time, and I was starting to go back down the negative routes I was going down, and I was partying too much. My life was like so easy. I didn't even start work till like 10:30 in the morning. I'd finish by like 2:30. It was cushy. So I just started to, and this is a massive cliche, I started going down the route of learning yoga. So, and the one thing the world doesn't need is another yoga teacher, as we all know. But I started practicing yoga every day.
I did a class with you. It was pretty good.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I started exploring the yoga route and meditation and things like that. And what that made me realize is that the path I was heading down with my work was not fulfilling me at all. And I was going to wake up one day, like 15 years down the line, and be like, okay, what have I actually achieved? And that was the point where I just thought, right, okay, I need to get out of here. I was having a difficult time in my relationship at the time. And my cousin, who's also called Patrick Flynn, like my uncle, my Down syndrome uncle. So I've got another Patrick Flynn, lots of Patrick Flynns in my family.
Yeah.
He's a windsurf and kitesurf instructor.
Okay.
And he used to come to Rhodes every year and teach windsurfing, now kitesurfing as well. And I went to visit him because he's just up for the crack. He's a good lad, and I went to visit him. And when I arrived in Rhodes on my own, I was like, it wasn't anything about Rhodes per se. It was more a question of, it was the decision that I decided to get out of England and do something new happened when I was there. So I was a bit like, okay.
So it's inspired you to actually do it when you came to Rhodes.
So yeah, so there's a thing when people make a decision that they want to make a change, but they don't know where to start. So there's something that's called the paradox of choice, and it's a bit like when you look at a menu and there's like 40 things on it. You want 5 things done well, not 40 things done average. So I went to Rhodes and I thought, okay, the sun's good. It's not too far away from my home, from my family. The weather's great, food's amazing. I just thought, okay, this is it now. I need to do. And so when I left Rhodes, I decided that I was going to start a yoga teacher training.
In Rhodes?
No, in London. But what that did is, because the course was a 6-month course and it had intensive weekends. So I I saw it as like a kind of a step ladder. So I saw every week as a rung on the ladder, and it was going to end in June. I started in September, and I thought, okay, if I follow this step ladder through, I'm going to end up, and when I finish, I'm going to leave. So I kind of created this thing in my head where I was like, okay, these are the steps. So it was quite a visceral, physical idea of the steps I was going to take.
Okay, interesting, actually. Interesting approach. Okay, cool. Yeah, so go on.
So I did that, and I started advertising for my business to be taken over. So I interviewed, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 people that wanted to take over my business. Because obviously most people can't do what I do with regard to the training and things like that. But what they can do is they can do the other parts. So having dogs stay at the house, taking them for walks in the park, things like that. So I kind of was trying to offset those parts of the business so someone could take over. And I found someone.
Okay.
And I just started working towards the steps. And as I went, I started kind of slowly kind of removing things from my life until I got to the June. And then by that time, I got qualified as a yoga teacher. My business was ready to be passed on to someone else. And I was like,
yeah. All right.
The difficult thing is,
when was this? Which year?
That was 2016.
2016. Okay,
and the really ridiculously interesting and crazy thing about it is the actual day that I left was the day of the Brexit referendum vote. That's
just in time to make an easy move.
Yeah, the concept of rats leaving the sinking ship springs to mind. But
I was in Bali at the time, in Indonesia, I remember.
it was completely bonkers. So that happened on that day. So I didn't really, when you're planning to move and you're making all these logistical things, you're not watching the news,
Oh.
It's one time where you're not even aware of what's going on in the world because you're so focused. And so I didn't even realize it was happening. But I woke up the next morning and it said Britain crashes out of the EU, and I was like, wow, okay. So to me, listening to English radio and TV back in Greece, it's like looking through this weird filter. I'm looking at a different world. So it's almost like the England that I left is not the England that there is now. And that's a little bit dramatic.
But it's
And
always
so,
like that because things change and they keep changing also when you leave.
yes, that's right. Exactly. So, I mean,
And your
you know all about
perspective
that. I mean,
changes as well. If you move abroad and you look at your own country,
yeah,
you start to look differently than when you're there.
totally. No,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know about that
I
as
know
much as
about that. Yeah.
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 So yeah, so
You
I
came
think
to Rhodes. They let you in.
I can't believe they let me in, but they did. I think I managed to sneak in around the back.
Yeah, probably.
I distracted them, and yeah, you know, the thing is, it's the key point I think really is just to be brave and it's to realize that you can't really lose, because because even if you make a bit of a mistake, you're still gonna have an experience, and you're gonna have a story, and you just keep going. You know, just make sure you try to surround yourself with good people, and make sure that you kind of prepare yourself for whatever happens to you. You know, because life is about experience. If it's not, you're a long time dead. You know, just get stuck in. And I mean, when I moved to Rhodes, I didn't know anyone except for my cousin, and he's just here in the summer. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I had some money in my pocket, which is always dangerous for someone like me. I had lots of time, and so I had a bit of a blowout. I had a couple of weeks where I just went crazy and just
then you knew a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's really fast over there. Everybody knows you in a week.
Hundreds of people, yeah, and just I rented out bicycles and scooters and stayed in different places, and yeah, it was very cathartic, because sometimes you just need to do that, and sometimes that's when you're done with that, you're like, okay, I've done
enough.
that now. Okay.
Now I'm going to go.
Yeah, exactly, and I think you know about that as well.
Yeah, I could be really like that, like woo, and I'm like, enough. Now I'm going to be serious, and then you go on.
Yeah, exactly. So that's I think when we.
And then I think
when we first met, I think that we were. I think maybe you were just coming out of that kind of phase, and I could see it. Like you still had that glint in your eye, and like ooh, but you were like, okay, right, I'm ready. Deep breaths. Yeah,
but different.
Yeah, exactly. I can see that, and that's inspiring, and that's why it's been lovely to watch your trajectory now, because you're doing all the things that you should be doing.
Thank you.
More than welcome. So the education writing thing, which is now my shtick, came about through rejection, because when I thought like an idiot, because I'm a bit of a child in so many ways, like most men. I thought, because I'd been to Zambia and I'd been working in Eastern Europe, wherever I'd been as a dog expert, people had been like, welcome and thanks for coming. And I'd be like, no worries. But in Greece, they were like that. They were like, go away. We don't want you here. Who the hell do you think you are, trying to tell us how to do anything about anything? And It's got to be honest, it hurt.
Yeah, I can imagine, because they can be quite rude when they don't want you. They don't want you.
I mean, it's a very hubristic place, you know. They don't want to be told that they're not perfect at something. So, so that was difficult for me. So,
yeah,
the only way I had to come up with an idea of getting around that somehow. And the way I did that was like, okay, if I can't help them one-on-one, I'm going to try and do something that's a bit bigger. So I came up with this idea of writing this book. So I'm really lucky. I found a great illustrator and a great producer, and I made this book, and I wrote it in, I don't know, maybe a day and a half, really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Got it all illustrated, mapped out. And the crazy thing is, the book was supposed to be to help families, young families or people with families, about how to build a better relationship with your animal, because there's nothing like that in English.
Mm-hmm.
And
the big problem with the stray cats and dogs and everything there. It's
a cultural,
better, but it used to be really bad.
It's a cultural thing, you know. You have, it's a bit like littering, or you know, in England we used to put kids up chimneys, you know, to clean their chimneys, you know. And at some point you have to make it so it's taboo. So imagine there's like 10 people on the street and 8 people send kids up chimneys, and then one day there's only one person left. doing it, and everyone's going, "Oi, mate, that's a bit rubbish. Don't do that."
Mm.
Because it becomes culturally taboo. So it's not enough to just legislate to create laws. You have to make it so it's ingrained in the physiology.
Yeah.
Which is a big part of my work, and that takes education, basically.
Yeah.
So I kind of went on a one-man mission to educate all the children in Rhodes, not just in Rhodes, in Greece, and by some freak of luck, my book got taken up by the Greek Animal Welfare Association, passed on to the Greek Ministry of Education, and it got the approval, and now it's in the curriculum. So which is crazy.
Incredible, because there's a lot of red tape in Greece to get something passed through. Normally.
Yeah, do you know what? Like,
yeah,
this is, I think this is kind of one of the key points of this conversation is like, you know, I had no idea that was going to happen, and I didn't even write the book for that purpose.
No.
So, which is kind of crazy. So.
Which is actually good, because then you didn't feel all that pressure that's going to be like in the education system.
Well, kind of yes and no, because you know, if I'd known it was going to get into the education system, I would have written it differently. That's a fact. I had to kind of reverse engineer the idea behind it in order to make it fit, which is kind of weird, but the point is like, you know, just keep creating. Keep doing new things, keep yourself buzzing, keep like following your ideas, because instinct and creativity, they're like muscles. They're like, if you don't use them, they waste away. Like I'm really out of shape at the moment. I've not done any exercise for a few months, and to be honest, I'm hating it.
You had exercise, but it was only like this.
Boy, it's supposed to be a secret.
It's not a secret if you put it all over Facebook.
So you know, but it's like a muscle. You know, you just be creative, and if you have an idea, just write it down. Like, write it down. Like, put it down. If you have an idea, put it on a voice note. Put it in a note. Because the thing is,
so true.
If you put it down and then you sleep on it, and it's still there the next day, then there's something there. Always, there's something there.
I had it this morning. I have the tendency to wake up when the first like ray of light appears on the horizon. Even though I blinded my room, somehow I wake up. I'm like a bird, you know? And then I get all these ideas, and I'm like, I want to sleep. It's like 5:30. And this morning I woke up and I had a very good idea. And I was like, in the dark, didn't even put on the lights, like really big on the paper. I'm like, okay, now I can go and sleep again. And then later I pitched my idea to one of my business partners. Like, yeah, that's really good. We're going to do that. I'm like, good. Yeah.
Well, that's really inspiring. You know, it's and you painted it in a very beautiful way. It's a very poetic way.
Yeah, doesn't always feel like it, because I just want to sleep, but I know it comes for a reason, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And then sleeping's can be done at other times, you know.
Just write the idea down.
Exactly. Yeah. So to write it down and follow the thread. And you know, the more you do that, the better you get it. It's like anything, just keep practicing it, and don't be frightened of getting something wrong. Don't be frightened of bad ideas, because
you know that I totally lost this skill. This muscle wasn't trained for so long when I was working as a headhunter in Amsterdam. And then in between I studied and stuff, and people always say, oh, I think you're very creative, because I'm also musical. I like making music and stuff like that, but that side of me has been very undeveloped, because I was like in business and very structured. Well, that's not really me, and it got really boring. But I had that time in Rhodes just working as a scuba instructor, but I started listening to podcasts, I started singing again, and just like enjoying life, and that woke up that side of me again, where I actually get inspiration, you know. That was the part that I was completely dead inside, didn't make me feel alive. That's why I decided I just needed to get out, you know.
No, it's you know, that's exactly the point, and you know, and the world needs that. The world needs, and it needs to hear that as well, because
that's why we're doing this.
Exactly. So yeah, what you know that illustrates is that you know, you have to be true to yourself. And I mean, it's a saying I think it's from the Bible: to thine own self be true. But it's like, you know, there isn't any better advice you can really give. If you're just going to put something down to something, you know, but in order to be true to yourself, you kind of have to find out who you are in the first place to be true to.
Exactly.
and that's
a journey.
introspection. But what you did in Greece is you took yourself out of the bear pit and you gave yourself headspace. You gave yourself time in the water, in nature. So if anyone's watching or listening to this and they're feeling a bit stuck, like take a walk, take a swim, take a run, get out, get away from people. And do you know what? Sometimes don't take your headphones, don't take your phone, just take a walk. And it can be quite intimidating sometimes, just being there with yourself.
Especially if you're not used to it. Yeah.
Of course not. Exactly.
It's the best thing you can do. Just be with yourself. But if you're not in a place that you really like yourself, then you know what you have to do. That's
a great point. If you're not comfortable sitting there with yourself, then you've got to ask yourself some questions, and you've got to say, like, why don't I want to be in my own company? And that's
exactly.
And that's a point when that's a good time to look for some good books to read. Which I always turn to reading books and listening to music.
Books did you read when you were in that first phase, when you were decided that you wanted to leave, like around that time? What did you read?
Yeah, you've got great books like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which is an incredible book. The Bhagavad Gita, Autobiography of a Yogi, anything by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I read.
All right. I put your book tips under the podcast so people can actually look up these books. All right, I wrote it down.
Sure.
So
look, and I'm really easy to reach. So anyone who has any questions or just wants to tap me up, then I will always reply and I'll always listen. So anyone's welcome anytime.
Yeah, I will put your contact details under it as well. So. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now. What's the way you're living, how you are feeling, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the big thing that I'm doing now is my kind of obsession is the human dog relationship vibe. Yeah. And it's about the kind of relationship you have with your best friend or your sibling, when you kind of look at each other and there's a little look and you know what's going on and you're like, you don't need to say anything. Mm-hmm. It sounds weird and abstract, but I get that with animals because
I have it too.
Exactly. So I'm really into the idea of teaching people about how to do that and why we should do it. And most of it is about learning to be present. It's about enjoying the moment. It's about appreciating the negatives and positives of whatever you're working with in the moment, and which is quite a kind of yogic idea. But I've had enormous success in the last 15 years working in animal shelters, doing rehabilitation work with dogs from shelters, and it's just about being kind, being present, understanding about the reflexive behavior, the physiological connection between the mind and the body.
Yeah.
And my Positive Pet Academy is basically devoted to doing that, because I think that if kids can learn about how to connect with their animals, then it sets them up in so many different ways. It's a symbiotic relationship, and there's nothing really better than that. It's all about the way we can connect to our roots as part of the planet, and it's magical. So that's I have the education program with the Greek government, and then I have my Positive Pet Academy. So anyone who has a dog that thinks, oh, I'd really like to. People always think, oh, how can I make my dog do this, or how can I make my dog not do that?
Do you have that online, John? Is that online?
Yeah,
so they can go for wherever in the world they can find you.
It's positivepetacademy.com, and obviously I do online consultations, but I also have a 12-week course which I've devised, which took me about a year to make, and it's mostly kind of philosophy, and obviously I'm working with dozens of different dogs in the videos and stuff like that, but it's just a way to help people connect. So I'm giving like a toolbox away. So and once you have the toolbox and you've learned how to use it, then everything else comes naturally.
Cool. Really nice. So put that in the info so people can look you up, because
Thanks very
that's
much.
interesting. And although they're not in Rhodes, they can still work with you if they like to. Yeah.
It's all up here, and it's it's a lot of it's just noticing stuff, just being present, and that has massive positive knock-on effects. It's like if you do have that moment when you wake up in the morning and the glint of light comes and you wake up and you have these ideas like you talked about earlier, you can be aware of that, write the ideas down, and then sit back and try and relax. And if you can't sleep, then great, use that time wisely, because at some point you're going to get tired.
Exactly. But mostly once I write it down, I can sleep again, because I'm not worrying that I forget. You can go back to it later.
That's self-awareness. That's just being self-aware, and that's obviously something you have in spades. So that's fantastic.
Cool. So looking at the John right now, and about looking back to the John that had money to burn and too much spare time in London, from 1 to 10, what does the John get right now, and what would the John get back then?
I think the John back then would probably not even get into the class and probably be kicked out before.
Kicked out. Yeah, and the happiness level of happiness.
Do you know what I'm a father to an incredible child. He's 9 years old.
I met him once. Yeah.
He's phenomenal. Yeah, he's incredible. I couldn't be happier, because I do have the greatest gift. I'm still alive. I'm relatively healthy. I've got a great family, and I've got a new project on the go, and I'm hopefully the education program is gonna touch and inspire thousands of people.
Yeah.
So that's and also because I play music, I get to behave like
music. Okay. Yeah.
So I get to behave like a teenager a few times a week and play in the evenings, and that's my midlife crisis. So
yeah, letting the child out every now and then.
Yeah, I'm hitting my midlife crisis head on, because I can't afford a Porsche right now. So playing in a band with a couple of English lads.
It's good, because parking a Porsche in Rhodes is not possible. So better play in a band.
Yeah, exactly. So I get to scratch that itch as well. So life's about balance, and you need to have an outlet. One needs to have an outlet, no matter what that is, working out or whatever it is, playing music. Have an outlet, because that's again where the creativity comes.
Yeah. So from being kicked out of the class for sure into being quite a good student of life.
Well, it's everything's a work in progress. It's we're never there, and it's again another cliche. The point of a journey is not to arrive. Just enjoy the process. Enjoy the process. I mean, I enjoy the process too much, because often I'll spend hours and hours and hours and hours on a process and then finish it, and then not care about the outcome of what happens to what I've just created, because I enjoyed the process. And that's a bit silly.
I'm gonna look up your human design. I'm very curious. I work with human design also in my mentoring, in my coaching, because it helps people that are not so self-aware to understand themselves easier.
Yeah, sure.
So,
well, I'm sure. I mean, the people that do that with you are very lucky, because you're very gifted.
Thanks. All right. So, John, any last words before we finish the podcast to the listener, viewer?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to connect with any relationship in your life, and you're interested in symbiotic relationship, and you're interested in being present, and obviously if you have a dog, then go on the positivepetacademy.com and check out the videos on there. Drop me a line, ask me any questions you want, and just keep enjoying yourself. Enjoy yourself, because life is short. And I always say to my son, I say, like, bad shit is going to happen in your life. Yeah, people are going to die, people are going to get ill. That's inevitable. And do you know what? At all those points in your life where that's not happening, then just enjoy yourself as much as you can, because it's going to happen. So just in the bits when nothing bad is happening, smile, go and have a piece of chocolate cake, jump off a cliff into a beautiful sea, and just do stuff that makes you happy. Put on some Stevie Wonder, or just have some fun, and because life is short. And follow your heart, and be brave.
Be brave. All right. Thank you so much, John. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and thanks for your inspiration.
Philakia.
And, philakia means kisses in Greek. All right. Bye.